Yes.
Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the agenda that was sent out?
This is Mike Hopkins. I'd make that motion.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome. Is there a second?
This is Travis. I'll second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed, please say no. All right. Hearing no objection, our agenda is agreed to. Thank you, everyone. Next, we have the approval of the minutes. Again, this was included in the email that Nathan sent out. Our meetings are now being recorded and posted on YouTube, so everyone has access to them. If there are any questions, we'll entertain those. Otherwise, we will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Susan. So moved.
Thank you, Susan. Is there a second?
Kathy Nygaard, second.
From Kathy Nygaard. Thank you very much. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. All right, our minutes are approved. Thank you, everyone. Next, we are going to have public comment for any items that are not on the agenda. So if there are any members of the public that have joined us, please feel free to introduce yourself and give comment. All right, seeing no takers, we will assume that there's no one who wishes to comment at this time. Next, we have the Board of County Commissioners. So, Josh, I will hand over to you.
Thanks, Denver. We're glad to be here. I'm excited to hear about the results of this survey. Dave and Juan are here as well. They can introduce themselves.
Yeah, I think I know everyone, but if there's anyone on the line who does not know me, I'm Dave Strohmeyer, one of the 3 commissioners.
I'm Juanita Vero, the second of the 3 commissioners.
There you go. Thanks, Denver.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. We know that you're busy, and we appreciate your participation and being a part of these meetings. So I think next we've got the Big Sky polls presentation, unless, Nathan, I am forgetting anything.
Nothing that I see here.
Okay, then I think we will turn it over to Dr. Barsky to talk about the public opinion poll.
Okay, I'm actually going to try sharing my screen here. Not sure if you can see that. Can somebody give me an affirmative if you can?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for having us. I'm Christina Barsky, and with me is Dr. Sarah Renfrey and Shane St. Ange. And we are excited to share with you what we heard from Missoula County voters in our general election survey. So I will tell you something about the findings, but with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Renfrey.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for having us today. So I'm Dr. Sarah Renfrey. I'm the chair of the Department of Public Administration and Policy and direct the Masters of Public Administration program. And we're just really excited to share our results today. We have this awesome research team, Dr. Barsky, who's an assistant professor in our department, as well as Shane St. Ange, who's on the line. He's one of our fantastic MPA alumni, but he's also finishing up his law degree. So he has amazing research skills. But just a little bit of background and what we're going to do today. We've been really fortunate to have a partnership with Missoula County and working on applied research projects since 2016 under the leadership of Rebecca Connors, but now with Bradley Seaman. So what we're going to share with you today is just, I'm going to start off with some basic kind of survey methodology lingo, because I think there's a lot of maybe misinformation or misnomers about how we approach this from a research perspective. We'll talk a little bit about the demographics who actually took the survey. Dr. Barsky is going to talk about some of our key findings, and I'll close out some ideas for future research. We just ask that save your questions till the end because we'll have questions and answers at the very end. So if you have any questions, just jot them down and then we'll take those at the very end. So we're just going to start off with just some basic kind of setting the stage on why we do survey methodology. And Dr. Barsky is going to kind of progress the slides here. And one of the reasons why we do survey research, I don't know if they're moving yet, Dr. Barsky.
We're on setting the stage, the first slide.
Okay, they didn't move. It didn't move on my end.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you.
Well, that's interesting.
There we go. Yeah, and yeah, there you go.
Okay.
And then it's if you want to put it in presentation view or just make it bigger.
Yeah, that's where it was, but I don't think you can see it when I'm advancing it.
Okay. All right, that's okay. Yeah, so a couple reasons why we just do survey research is just, again, trying to capture a moment in time and get a pulse on public perceptions, and also really look at how this moment in time can help to make informed policy making decisions. A couple other things to look out for, if we can go to the next slide, Dr. Barsky.
Yeah, Dr. Renfrey, can you just give me 1 minute while I try and figure out, it's advancing on my end, but not on yours. So I'm not quite sure. Sorry, we don't use Teams at UM and we're not exactly experts in it. Give me 1 second. Let me
That
try.
is perfectly timed. You guys take your time. We are ahead of schedule right now, and we greatly appreciate you being with us and sharing this information with us.
Okay, that worked. Thanks, Dr. Barsky. All right, so just a couple other just lingo and terminology that we use. So we have our full report. I think it's about 37 pages long, which I know that the county is going to share, and I know that Bradley's happy to answer questions about that. But a couple of things just to provide context is, number one, who's funding the project. So whenever you're looking at polling or survey methodology, it's really important to look at who's actually funding it. And then also look at the fine print in terms of what questions are asked. I think, we had a press release that went out last week with just a couple of questions, but I think it's important to provide context and look at all of the questions. One of the things that I usually use when I teach any of these courses with our students is just thinking about the way in which the question is asked. And so one of the examples that I use is for a presidential race a while ago, they asked a question, would you vote for this person that they fathered an illegitimate child? And so thinking about the way in which you ask a question impacts how people answer it. So we want to make sure that it's really an art and science, and it takes days, not just a couple hours, to design survey questions. The other big piece is just the sample size. For this particular project, we're looking at Missoula County, and there's a lot of different ways that you can look at survey methodology from state to national, which I'll talk about here in a moment. But I think one of the misperceptions is that if you have a really large sample size, more is better. But we'll talk about in a moment about just margin of error and what to look for. The other piece too is generalizability. And so again, this is something as researchers that's really important for us. So can you replicate the results? And we're going to move to the next slide here. So if you're looking at the fine print, our margin of error for this project, we had 698 participants. So the margin of error is 3.71%, meaning that in any of the results, you just add or subtract that 3% to the results. And you can also see, getting back to this idea that the bigger sample size you have is more representative. We do have a representative sample of active registered voters in Missoula County. And so if you have a rate that is 5% margin of error, 5% or less, that is acceptable within a research perspective. And so you can see, even if you had a sample size of 400 to 5,000, you're still within that generalizable range, and something that we really wanted to start off with, because I think there's a lot of misnomers that, 698 participants in a countywide, even a statewide survey is really significant. So we're going to shift our focus to just starting off with the demographic information. And the reason why we're providing this context is because the demographics inform what is statistically significant and what Christine or Dr. Barsky is going to talk about in terms of key findings. So we opted to do a mixed method. We did a telephone and online survey. They're the exact same questions. The reason why we opted to do this is because we've done telephone surveys for quite some time, for decades, but the field is shifting towards online and also to capture more of the youth participants. And so we're making sure that we're on the cutting edge side in terms of how we are selecting and reaching out to our sample. So to represent that in terms of modality, 87% of the sample were telephone and 13%. But again, I want to stress that they're the exact same questions that we asked. And a full report of that and the breakdown of that is at the end of our report in the appendices. In addition to this is just the breakdown of the demographics. And so we're going to start off just looking at gender. So you might say, well, why is the sample predominantly female or more female than male? So our sample was 50% female, 40% male, 1% non-binary, and 2% preferred not to answer. And we suggest that this is consistent with Missoula County, but also this again was taken in response to a general election. And so women are, more apt to participate in general election presidential races and casting their vote. So this is consistent with what's going on, not only in the county, but also nationally and statewide. Another key demographic area is age. And I think one of the unfortunate findings is that often 18 to 26-year-olds are not the ones that are participating at highest levels. And so this again is indicative or representative in the sample that we have here. So the vast majority are 27 years of age or older. And so again, this is looking at in terms of not only in parallel with Missoula County with census data, but also with Montana's voting age. Another demographic area is education. We ask folks to identify what level of education they have. And you'll see that Missoula County, about 42% in 2019 suggested they had completed a bachelor's degree. And then you can also see within our sample that 25% have a little bit of college, 30% have a bachelor's degree, and then even beyond that with post-baccalaureate. Income is another area that we examined. We realized that statewide, the average income is about $30,000 to $35,000, and we know that the median household is a little bit higher in Missoula County. But again, the biggest bulk, or 20% of the respondents, were within $20,000 to $37,000 per year. The next one is party identification, which we're a little bit cautious about because we do not register by party in the state of Montana. So again, this is folks having the ability to self-identify what party they're representative of. 39% identified with the Democratic Party, 28% with the Independent, and then 20% Republican. But this is consistent with what findings that we're seeing, not only with Missoula County, but also in the U.S. in general, is that individuals are trending more towards the independent instead of identifying with one party in the two-party system. The last demographic that I wanted to go into before handing it off to Dr. Barsky is one other area that the Missoula County Elections Office asked us to look into, and thanks to Shane, our student was really instrumental in this, is looking at the geographic breakdown. So Missoula County, the Elections Office has precincts, and they have classified them in terms of city, suburban, or rural. And so we use that to examine then the respondents out of the 698. So our geographic distribution, 58% were within city limits, 26% within suburban, and then 16% within rural. So again, we wanted to start off with not only kind of the terminology that we use as researchers just to provide a foundation, but then also who actually participated in the study. And the demographics really helped to then run statistical analysis that Dr. Barsky is going to share in terms of what were some of the key findings that we had. And I'll hand it off to her.
Great, thank you. And thanks for your patience, everyone, as I figured out how to make my screen share work. So for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to share with you a little bit about the substantive findings, what folks had to say when we asked them about the 2020 election experience. One question that we consistently ask voters is about their motivation for participating in the electoral process, right? So is it because a member of a political party asked you? Is it because there are issues that you care about on the ballot? Is it because people told you that you should, social pressure, or is it something else? And I think these findings are consistent with what we know about the Missoula community at large, that 67% of voters cite some sort of civic participation, either believing that it's our responsibility as a citizen to vote, or believing that voting is essential to democracy. So the sense of responsibility and belief in democracy as their primary reason for voting in the November 2020 election. And you'll see that we had no statistically significant measure of folks saying that they personally know the candidate or social pressure, and very little response for, not sure why they voted in November 2020 or party affiliation. Related to voter confidence, voter motivation is voter confidence. And as you all have been living through the same news cycle that I have been, we know that confidence is beginning to be an even more important factor when we talk about American elections. And so asking voters in Missoula County about their confidence in a variety of items, like their confidence in their mail vote being counted, their confidence in the vote by mail process, their confidence that Missoula County is free of voter fraud, all returned very high levels of confidence, as you see here. The blue and the green bars represent either strongly agreeing or agreeing with positive confidence statements. The orange and the red are they're the disagree and strongly disagree. If you look at our final report, I want to make an important note here. On these charts, I removed the not applicable numbers from the total N in percents in calculating these averages, because it would skew our data to sort of see another bar to the right of the red bar saying these are the folks that say it's not applicable. So this is the total percent of respondents that answered this question with a strongly agree to strongly disagree. So notably, Missoula County voters are expressing very strong confidence in the electoral process. Everything from ensuring that their vote is counted, their mail vote is counted, to their confidential information being kept secure, ballots being kept secure, and believing that the voter rolls, the registration process is accurate. A third component that we investigated was voter satisfaction. So not just having confidence in the system, but also how satisfied you are, right? Dial testing, like how do we do today, 1 through 5? And interestingly, again, we see very high levels of satisfaction. So Missoula County residents are saying they think Missoula County Elections is doing a good job. One of the questions that the EAC asked us to research was understanding communication between Missoula County and voters, how voters were receiving information, how Missoula County was doing. And I think it's commendable here that we see the fourth line down, communication from Missoula County about the voting deadline, 66% very satisfied, 29% somewhat satisfied. So we see, 81% of respondents indicating that they, we're seeing this very high number of Missoula County residents expressing that they received communication from Missoula County and that they're satisfied with it. Similarly, 81% of respondents indicated that they received some form of communication from Missoula County about the 2020 November election, which brings us to this next slide, which is asking voters specifically from a large list of options how they received information about the November 2020 general election. So this was a multiple response question, which means voters could choose all of the options that applied to them. I think unsurprisingly to any of us, right, that were living in Missoula County during the last election, mailers were by far and away the #1 way that voters reported hearing about the election. 81% of respondents indicated that that's how they received information about the election. Highlighted in green are Missoula County modes of communication. So from Missoula Votes, the Missoula County website, or a call to Missoula County, all of which returned, moderate to low levels of communication. Nothing really compares to the number of respondents saying that mailers are how they heard about the electoral process. I think one of the greatest highlights that we see in this research is this slide. Comparing 2020 to 2018, we asked respondents if they voted in Missoula County during the 2018 midterm election. 551 indicated that they had. And so we asked that 551, that subsample, to compare their experience in 2020 to 2018. I think it's incredibly notable that just 8% of respondents indicated that they had a worse experience in this last election than they did in 2018, and that in total, 92% of voters that participated in the survey were positive about their November voting experience, even in light of all of the dynamics taking place, and in particular, the COVID-19 pandemic. So kudos to Missoula County for this result. We wanted to find out how people returned their votes. This was important for the EAC to sort of take a look at how to communicate about returning ballots, and the national media talking about slow mail service, et cetera. So we see 50% of respondents put their mail ballot in the mailbox and let the post office take care of it. Meanwhile, 28% brought their ballot themselves to the county office and dropped it off. 14% utilized some sort of drop box from the county at different events, and 8% indicated that they voted in person on election day. Another question that the EAC was interested in us understanding was satisfaction with the vote by mail process in 2020 and the likelihood of using vote by mail in future elections. So 94% of respondents who said that they returned their ballot by mail in the November 2020 election indicate satisfaction with the process, either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. Of the 351 respondents that returned their ballot by mail, 94 indicate that they are either extremely likely or likely to utilize this process in future elections. And I'm sure that Nathan finds that not surprising, as he works on debriefing from this election and how many folks in Missoula returned their ballots this session. And I think it's important to point out that just 5% of voters indicated that they're unlikely to use vote by mail in the future, and that this number only rises to 11% of respondents if we were to say, would you vote by mail if return postage was not paid? So not a substantial increase. And the final slide that I will share with you before turning it back over to Dr. Renfrey is what voters told us they wanted in the future from a list. So a plurality of voters that responded to our survey indicated that they'd like a county-produced election guide. This is similar to what we heard in 2016 when we conducted a countywide survey. This is followed closely by the ability to register to vote and update voter information like addresses online, which understandably isn't a county process, right? That's something that's undertaken at the state level. We find it interesting that suburban and rural residents preferred the county-produced election guide when compared to city respondents who expressed preference for the online voter registration and change of address options. So this is where we see a little bit of difference in what respondents told us they were interested in and would prefer to see from the county depending on geography. So these options were followed by Missoula County residents looking for folks to increase voting accessibility for the disabled in the future, which remained sort of the third rank for both city, suburban, and rural residents. So that's just the high-level overview of some findings we wanted to share with you. Like Dr. Renfrey has mentioned, there is a complete report that has many more details and some more cross-tabulations of demographics with certain responses that go into more detail about this. But before we sign off, I want to turn it back to Dr. Renfrey for sort of looking ahead and next steps.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Barsky. So a couple of things in terms of some takeaways and some areas that we can continue to partner together on this important work on not only civic engagement, but how can we better understand what's going on with participation within our own county. So like we've talked about, we started doing projects with Missoula County Elections Office in 2016, but we did not want to compare a deep dive into 2016 and 2020 because in 2016 we looked at a primary election, and this is a general election with a presidential, also during a pandemic. So we find that it's really important moving forward that we continue to do research in both of those areas. And we'd like to partner with Missoula County to create a dashboard that you can put on your website. If you guys have used Tableau before, we could put that dashboard on Missoula County websites. And then that way you can see if things are changing over time, and that can inform decision making. The other piece too in our research, we were provided the Missoula County voter registration file, and so that's how we conduct the research. But we also want to spend some time maybe on a separate project on what about the non-registered voter population? So why are they not registering to vote? What are some of the driving facets of their behavior and why they're opting not to participate? And then the last piece too is just, this research is driven in quantitative. So looking at yes, no responses or a Likert scale on a scale of 1 to 5. But we also want to spend some time digging a little bit deeper and maybe doing some focus groups next time to really capture the stories or experiences on the ground. I know that Dr. Barsky's done some research in this area in Arizona, but I guess the main concluding point that we want to make is that this is really cutting edge research because no one else in the state has done this yet in terms of having data right after a global pandemic, that we're still within that global pandemic, but also trying to see what has happened, in terms of the voting population, their perceptions about the process. And this is not only a research baseline, not only for the rest of the state, but for the rest of the nation. So we just really appreciate being able to partner in cutting edge research with Missoula County. I think the other piece too, some questions that I've received over the last couple of weeks is that, there's often a stereotype in the state that, for better or worse, is used to classify Missoula County in terms of statewide perceptions. And I think one of the things to remember too is that we have a very representative sample, 698. And also too, Dr. Barsky and I did a similar study in 2016 to parallel the study that we did with Missoula County. And so we really look to doing a statewide project, and we really invite other counties to reach out to us, for even the Secretary of State's office. We think that this research is really important to not only get the perceptions of Missoula County, but also the rest of the state. And so with that, we will open up for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for your expertise and going over that information with us. Do folks on my committee or commissioners have any questions for Dr. Barsky or Dr. Renfret?
No, this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
I have a question, Denver. This is Todd.
Go ahead, Todd.
I was curious on the motivation question. Was that the interviewees had to pick a single response, or could they pick multiple?
Yeah, so Dr. Barsky can talk about this too, but she signified the ones that, like the multiple response ones, but those are just single response questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And on the information one, where it indicated mailers and so on and radio, was that information strictly from the election office, or just general information about the election, which could come from canvassing, etc.? So the latter.
Right, the second, it's how they received information about the November 2020 election, just sort of writ large.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting to see that text is only 1%, when the party canvassers from both parties indicated they'd sent out thousands upon thousands of texts.
Yeah.
Interests me, yeah.
Shane, do you want to? Yeah, we want to give a shout out to Shane, to our amazing graduate student, if you don't know him. So Shane, do you want to add to that too?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing about internet, email, text, and some of those other responses below other, those were not pre-coded. So they were not options that were available to some of the respondents. So those were options that I then coded when I saw we had an other option, right? So I went through the others and saw what similar responses there were. And so if I saw that there were greater than 10, or I think I chose 5 this time, then I would recode all those responses. So if we did have that option, text option, I imagine it would be higher, but that just shows you that of those who responded to other, they did put text there. And sometimes they listed multiple things for other. So
Thank you.
Fantastic. Any other questions for Dr. Barsky, Dr. Renfret, and Mr. Stange?
Dave, did you have a question? I saw your little yellow hand.
Yes, I got the yellow hand there, jaundiced hand. No question. Just thanks for your work on this. This is really impressive. I look forward to taking a look at the broader findings beyond your high-level presentation, and certainly look forward to the EAC's recommendations as far as anything actionable that we might move forward with. But I think elections in Missoula County is setting the bar, and I'm super thankful for all the work that you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity for our students too. We really appreciate it.
Like Commissioner Slotnick has a question as well. Go ahead, Josh.
Sure. Thanks. First, I'm going to echo Dave and just saying thanks. This is super important and so timely and right on the heels of the election. And in this historical moment where elections are being called into question, it's really great to have this information. So if you were to offer us one piece of advice, Dr. Renfret, based on this, what would it be?
I think that you need to keep doing the research, right? Like, we really strongly think that we would like to continue to partner with you so we can do a dashboard and so we can show trends over time. And so we have data from 2016, and I think let's keep doing that and use this as a kind of a baseline to say, okay, state of Montana, let's be cutting edge in the research that we do, and let's replicate this statewide too. So partnering with your other commissioners across the state.
Okay, well, we can keep doing it here. They really love to follow our lead, so I'm sure.
But this is Susan. I would like to ask though, what are some recommendations or ideas that you would have for the EAC or for the elections department that could improve the process for us and for the voter?
Yeah, I think definitely we consistently hear about the voter guide because there's so much mailing information and they trust what they're getting from their county. And so I think if you're able to do that for each election, so we do that at the state level, but some of the ballot initiatives are really confusing for folks. So I think that that's probably one of the number one. But I also think keeping up in terms of, I think shifting to mail-in. I think people really appreciated the mail-in ballot. It was easy, it's accessible. I mean, we had record turnout. So I think that's one area, because in 2016, we talked about maybe cutting polling places because polling places are so expensive. But I think we've seen now that we went through a mail-in ballot that people are, we even had data that Dr. Barsky didn't share, but what if you got your ballot without postage? People will still participate in mail-in. So I think the two big pieces of advice would be continue mail-in. It's easy, it's increasing access, and people, you just mail it to folks and they turn it in. And when they're busy, they can turn it back in. And I think the other piece is just spending the time, and I know it'll be time intensive and resource intensive, but doing the countywide voter guide. Shane, do you want to add to that? I don't want to, because since Dr. Barsky's on the EAC, so.
Yeah, no, I think those were kind of the key findings. I know there was an interest in looking at where location-wise things may be different, especially when you're trying to reach people maybe in a rural area. I would just look to the report for those things. And if there are further questions, those are maybe things we can look at further. I know it won't take me long, so.
Very good. It looks like Todd has a question, and then I've got a question, and then it looks like Susan may also have a question. So Todd, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. What was the time span? Like, when did the questioning or the survey begin, and when did it end?
It was November 9th and November 20th, so right after the election.
9th through the 20th?
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to add that this is a great source of information, and it'll really give the EAC, speaking for the EAC, some really good guideposts. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Todd. So my question was going back to the slide that you showed in the beginning about voter confidence, voter satisfaction. It looked like roughly 80% of the respondents responded in the positive, that they were satisfied overwhelmingly with the election. That's great news. My only question is, how does that compare to other cities, other states, nationwide?
Great question.
Dr. Renfrey and I built a confidence index based on some of these questions back in 2016, and we've yet to see another municipality or state replicate our findings. So unfortunately, we can't give you like a apples to apples comparison. I would give an analogy though. You know, in political science and public administration, we know that I like my elected officials, right? I like my commissioners, I like my city council members, I even like my representative to Congress. But I don't like Congress, right? So we see some of that perhaps playing out here, which is like, I really like Missoula County elections. I trust Missoula County elections, but elections, right? Elections, this big thing that is super decentralized, I'm going to say I have a little less confidence in. So it's, unfortunately, we don't have like the hard data to share with you. That's just an analogy though from this field of research.
Gotcha. Thank you, Dr. Parsky. Susan, I think you're next.
Yeah, the question I had was on the voter pamphlet. Did you ask people if they wanted information, hard copy information about the issues, or about the candidates, or about both, or was that even questioned?
Yeah, so we didn't dive that deeply into that, and we just asked, you know, the voter guide was one of the areas, so Missoula County voter guide, so we didn't dive into the specifics of that.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments?
I just want to quickly thank everybody for all the work you did on this, and Shane shuffling the data around with our last minute request that how can we look at it a different way. And I just wanted to clarify when the more detailed results will be sent out to everyone.
Bradley already has. We gave that to him on Monday.
Okay.
So you guys should have had that. It's on our website too. So
Great.
Yeah, but it's 35 pages long with the appendices. So
Perfect.
Excellent. We will look forward to digging into that. If members do have further questions, may they contact you directly, or how can we get in touch with you?
yeah, feel free to email me or Brad.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for your work. This has been very illuminating, and thank you for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Wonderful. So I believe next, and I should back up and say, Bradley sent out an email earlier this morning that he's had a family emergency come up and he wasn't able to join us, unfortunately. But if you all do have questions for either him or Nathan, I would encourage you to email them directly. As I understand it, the next thing we have on our agenda goes back to the commissioners to talk about this joint project that we've been working on. Josh, would you like to take it from there?
Oh, you know, you're going to have to, I'm not sure what you're referring to, Denver. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That might have been a miscommunication. So my understanding, and as you folks know, after our last meeting in December, I sat down and did some brainstorming with Bradley about a joint project that all of our members can work on over the next year that will further the work of the elections office. We kind of came up with a rough proposal, and I believe that Bradley spoke with the commissioners, and I thought that y'all had some feedback or some clarification for us on how you'd like us to proceed.
I don't know that we did. I think what Bradley proposed was well received by the commission. I don't recall us having any changes to that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Commissioner Strohmeyer. So then I'll just talk a little bit about kind of where I think we want to go with this. And if folks have questions, by all means, please ask them or chime in. So in the past, the Elections Advisory Committee has kind of operated in kind of an ad hoc fashion. We'll have meetings, we'll have reports, we'll ask questions. Sometimes there'll be resolutions. But with so many talented individuals that are bringing their passions and their experience to bear, we want to be able to work collaboratively on a project that is year-round, that is really focused on the survey, because as Dr. Renfret mentioned, this information is valuable to us, but it is so much more valuable if it's in context, and if the county and the elections department continue to engage the public year after year to build out this survey and the survey results. What we want to be able to do as a committee is really to break down and to dive into the results that we got from this survey, to be able to think about where we can go from there. What are further questions that we can ask? How much further can we dig into some of these issue areas? And are there other questions that we want to ask beyond what has already surfaced? That is something that we can work on as a whole committee and in subcommittees that we think will really be able to lay the groundwork for finding more information, be able to dig a little bit deeper the next year when we do another public opinion survey. So those are the conversations I have with Bradley. Commissioner Slotnick, does that sound correct with the conversations you all have had?
Yeah, roughly so. I guess I was balking because I didn't remember specific details, but it sounds like the details are yet to be filled in.
To a certain degree, where we'd like to be able to go from here is to create some subcommittees that can work in the interim between committee meetings that can further dig into some of these questions, can propose new questions. And between working in subcommittee and the committee as a whole, we want to be able to have that back and forth and do some really good work. A little bit later on in our meeting, we're going to talk about the creation of subcommittees. So I think I'm going to hold off from there. But are there any questions or comments that folks have right now?
I mean, the only thing that's jumping to mind is you asked about voter compared to other places, and I would love to get a handle on that to see if this is an area we need to improve in or not. Is 80% just fantastic? Is 80% the top? It'll never really be higher because you always have 20% of discontents. Or are there things that we should actually and could actually be working on to improve voter confidence? And then I'd love to find out from those 20%, why are they not confident? And if the answers reflected things that are happening nationally, not locally, we don't have to worry about it. If they say that, oh, I saw Nathan stumbling down the sidewalk on a Sunday morning, I know that he's, we want to find out what's at the core here. So those are questions I'd like to know more on.
Thank you for your feedback, and I agree with you. And I think that we can dig a little bit deeper and come to some better understandings. So with that, I would suggest that we hold off on this conversation and move on to an election administrator report. Again, Bradley's not here to be able to share that with us in person, but Nathan, do you have some notes from him?
I mean, I can give you a brief recap of some of the things that we've gone over. A lot of these things, the building progress is something that I don't have any information to share with you on that, unfortunately. The NVRA process, though, is proceeding ahead. They still have some maintenance to do on the statewide voter database before we can proceed with the NVRA process, which is the process of inactivating voters who have not voted in the last two federal primary elections, or federal general elections, sorry. So we're waiting for some maintenance to take place on that before we can proceed with that. The records request that was put forward by Mr. Cheetah through his representative Quentin Rhodes did go through. We produced the affirmation envelopes for them to count through on the 4th, Monday the 4th of this month. That was completed in, I'm going to say, less than half a day. The results of that I'm unaware of because I'm not exactly sure what they intend to do with that data, but they completed their count and we sealed the envelopes back up and we put them back into the records center. The Sealy Sewer and DeSmet election that is going to take place on February 23rd is proceeding ahead. The ballots for that were printed on Friday. And that means also that the UACAVA and the overseas and civilian and military voters have received their ballots. I believe we've already received one ballot back. So that election is already going. And so you think even in an off year, we still have at least probably 4 elections going on this year. So we have a busy year with elections. The other thing that he had on his list was the election of officers. And that's the election of officers for the EAC itself. And I think that that's going to have to wait until April because, clearly Denver and Shibu seats will be open we're taking applications right now. There has been an applicant interviewed, but I believe both Denver and Shibu have submitted letters of interest in continuing and asking to be reappointed to the EAC. So that's great. And that's where all that stands. Yeah, the creation of subcommittees. I think I'm just going to keep all of that stuff very brief. I know Bradley would have so much more for you on that one, but I'm just going to give you that because I think that the creation of subcommittees is a bigger and a more important project right now. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Denver.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Before we do that, are there any questions or comments for Nathan from our committee? I'm not hearing or seeing any. Nathan, I do have a question for you that you may know. For folks who are interested in the bills that are being sponsored and put forward and that we're tracking, where can they go to find out more information? I don't want to take up a lot of time right now going through specific bills, but I do want to make sure that folks know where to go to get that info.
So that's a great question because all of my information has been coming directly from Bradley on that. I have been that's an area that I've kind of removed myself from a little bit to focus on the Sealy election, doing address audits and certain things like that. Bradley has been involved in some of the communications on these bills. I've read through some of the bills, but as to where you can go to get the information, I'm not able to answer that.
Denver, this is
that's
Travis.
Okay. Thank you, Nathan. Travis, I'll come back to you here in a second. I'll just say I will follow up with Bradley and make sure that we get an email out to folks with those links so that folks can do that digging if they choose to. And Travis, we'll go to you.
I do have some comments related to legislation. I was going to save them at the end for comments from committee members. But since you brought up the topic, which would you have me do?
Thank you, Travis. Why don't you go ahead and ask your questions or state your comment while we're talking about that issue?
Okay. So it's not really a question. It's an area of significant concern and frustration. So during the 2019 legislature, there was a joint resolution that created a legislative interim study on voting accessibility for people with disabilities. And over the last 2 years, legislators, election administrators, people with disabilities, and disability advocates all worked together to create what has now become Senate Bill 15. The primary goal behind it was to ensure that all elections are accessible to people with disabilities. The primary concern of elections that aren't traditionally accessible are local elections, school board elections, those types of smaller elections that happen. Keeping in mind this bill was developed through a lot of collaboration over 2 years. There was supposed to be a hearing on this bill yesterday, and one of the lines in the bill states, in a mail ballot election, the election administrator shall ensure that voter interface devices are available at locations appropriate to provide accessibility for disabled electors. It's a vague statement. It requires that election administrators do some due diligence in determining whether or not locations are appropriate for that level of access. I understand that there's processes in place for the issuing of ballots, whatnot. That's not really my area of concern. My area of concern is that our election administrator feels that that language itself is too prohibitive, that it would require election interface devices in all, or voter interface devices, or the express vote in all locations. And I guess my area of concern is that, and I understand that we also had issues with the cold affecting the ability of those machines to work in an outdoor capacity. And so our elections office has stated that they would not support this bill at this late stage in the game due to this language. Now imagine this language, we're 30 years past the ADA. If we can't come up with ways to make things accessible, we shouldn't even be holding or facilitating elections. Imagine if this line in the bill was polling places should be available to women voters or voters of color as appropriate. Can you imagine the outrage that would raise? I am extremely frustrated that we are still coming up with excuse after excuse for not making voting accessible for people with disabilities. I understand that there are environmental and architectural barriers to access that always exist, but this language does not require that all locations, drop locations, have a ballot or a express vote. It says where appropriate, and so that would require a little bit of due diligence, a little bit of forethought, a little bit of planning, which is the intent of the language. And I find that the objection to this language is wanting the legislature to legislate every single little problem that an election administrator might face in providing access, which is not something that legislation typically does. It provides a direction and a purpose, and then it leaves it to where there can be planning on the local level to ensure that, okay, this place may not be appropriate, but that place is, and then plan accordingly and message accordingly. So I just wanted my concerns, my frustrations to be recorded in this meeting and part of the public record. Thank you.
Yeah. Travis, thank you very much for your comment and your concern and bringing that to the other committee members' attention. Again, I don't want to get into a back and forth debate over specific bills, but is there anyone else who has a question or comment about bills in the legislature right now that may affect elections?
Hi, Denver. This is Shibu. I just want to comment that if you search the laws database from the legislature, there currently are, I believe, 95 bills with the word election in the title and 11 with the word voting. So there's a lot of stuff potentially coming down the pike. And thank you, Travis, for bringing SB 15 to our attention. But yeah, there's a lot of those. There aren't bill drafts for all of those yet, so they're still kind of in the initial part of the process. But there's a lot of stuff that will be going on.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Shiva.
Yeah, it's just a
Travis, did
matter
you
of
have anything
parsing.
else?
It's just a matter of parsing through those. I mean, on the legislative site, that's where I have accessed them, and that the main ones, SB 15, House Bill 107. There's a couple of ones that are of immediate concern to us right now, but I'm sure, like Shivu said, if you search through, there's a plethora of election-related bills coming up.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Shibu and Travis. If no one else has anything else they'd like to say or ask, I would suggest we move on to old business and talk about subcommittees.
Hey, Denver. This is
Yes,
Hopkins.
Mike, go ahead.
I was just perfectly fine to move on. I was just going to say to Travis to try to get in touch with me maybe after the meeting to talk about Senate Bill 15, if he doesn't mind.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. So let's talk about subcommittees. So again, the idea is that if we are going to be embarking on a joint project that we'll continue to work on throughout the rest of the year, we can get so much more done if we create some subcommittees that we can break into. And there are three specifically that Bradley and I have suggested. And what I'd like to do is have a conversation about these committees and be able to identify folks who want to serve on those committees. And then what we would ask those subcommittees to do is to coordinate and schedule a time that they can meet between now and our April meeting. And of course, our elections office will help us connect with the right technology to be able to make that happen. The three committees that we are suggesting that we create, the first one would be an outreach committee. We are all ambassadors for Missoula elections. We all carry that responsibility to some degree. But the idea is this would be kind of the core of our committee that would be charged with reaching out to groups and organizations in Missoula to help educate them on the work that we are doing and to try and provide credible information to the public so that we can continue to improve that confidence in elections number. So that's the first committee. The second committee along similar lines would be geared more towards recruitment. So in the past, our EAC has done a fantastic job at recruiting election workers and helping secure polling locations. There is certainly more of that work that we can do in the future, but this would be the kind of core of our committee that would take on those responsibilities. It's not to say that we all wouldn't have a responsibility for it, but this would be the group that would be driving that work. And then finally, a third committee would be focused on research, looking for policies and ideas that other cities and states are experimenting with, ways to conduct their elections differently. This could also be working on identifying similar groups to the EAC in other parts of the country and start to build those connections and to identify work that they are doing. While this committee is somewhat novel, I'm sure that there are similar committees across the country, and this could be a really important way that our committee can start to build some of those relationships. So those are the three kind of subcommittees that we've sketched out and are recommending. Again, one focused on research, one focused on outreach, and one focused specifically on recruitment. I'd love to hear questions or comments that folks may have.
Denver, this is Todd.
Go ahead, Todd.
The project has not been identified, is that correct?
So the project has been kind of loosely identified and kind of outlined. What we want to be able to do is take the results of this public opinion survey that Big Sky Polls has just conducted, and compare that not only to the similar survey done in 2015, but other similar surveys that may have been conducted across the country, to be able to identify further questions that we want to be able to explore, whether that is with a new question or a different question or a reworded question. And so through working with our outreach subcommittees, our research subcommittees, we want to start to be able to identify questions that we want to be able to ask in the future, and be able to look at results that that may point the way to further research that's conducted. But the idea is to be able to take what has been created and worked on and be able to flesh that out, so that we get around to September of next year, the committee has had a full opportunity to be able to digest that information and to make some recommendations about what else we would like to ask.
Of the of respondents to surveys?
Yes, in the public opinion polls and surveys.
So an attempt to refine our generation of information.
Exactly right, Todd.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then the three committees you have proposed sound very reasonable to me, and I'd be happy to serve on the outreach committee.
Okay. Thank you, Todd. I'm going to go to Susan next. Susan, and then if anyone else has a question or comment, would you please raise your hand?
I have a question.
Let's go with Susan first, please.
Kathy Nygaard, I have a question. We all filled out, we were asked to fill out a questionnaire about our interests and qualifications and whatnot. Is that being used to assign these subcommittees, or is that just for naught?
That's a great question, Kathy, and I do want to be able to address that. We're kind of talking about two different assignments. On the one hand, what we're talking about right now are these specific subcommittees that will give our committee a little bit more structure and be able to do some work during the interim. In addition to those assignments, what we have asked folks to do is to identify what we're referring to as areas of specialization, which is specific knowledge or work within the elections department, that each member can identify areas that they are interested in and then be able to kind of specialize or learn more, working with Bradley and Nathan and perhaps other elections workers, so that when we do have an issue that we are discussing or talking about, we have people who are specifically focusing on some of those sub areas. So we have the areas of specialization, and then you also have the subcommittees that we want to create. Does that make sense to folks?
Not really. Okay. I don't see the difference. I don't see the difference. I mean, do you want people who have expertise in some of these areas to be assigned to those committees, or is it just what we like?
That's a great question. So we would like folks who have a particular interest in doing that work. So if you have experience in doing research or talking about or researching public policy, that would be a great fit for this research committee. If you're the kind of person who really enjoys reaching out and building connections, and you're connected to other groups within Missoula County, either civic groups or political groups, the recruitment committee or the outreach committee might be a better fit. But in addition to those kinds of work that folks will do in the interim, we also want folks to be able to identify from that list of, I think there were 10 kind of areas of specialization, specific types of work that the elections department engages in, and we'd like folks to identify those areas that are most interesting or most concerning to them, and to be able to specialize in those areas.
Okay.
So one is focused on gaining information, and the other is focused on what we want to do with that information.
And I think the other opportunity out of this is that we can be working locally to find out what people want, who's out there who can help us accomplish what we want to accomplish, but also it gives us the opportunity to go nationally and find out what else is going on out there, and how can we take good ideas nationally and implement them in what we're doing locally.
Yes, very well said,
He
Susan.
actually needs to take advantage of what we know.
Yeah, it could work both ways. And Denver, I would be interested in outreach.
Wonderful. So I've got Todd and I've got Susan that are interested in outreach. Is there anyone else who is particularly interested in that committee? Ideally, we'd like to find 3 to 4 people at the most that could serve on that subcommittee.
I would, but I'm an alternate, so put me where you want.
That's fine, Amber. Or I think it was Kathy speaking.
Yes.
Yeah. Even as an alternate, we encourage people to be members of these subcommittees. As full members of the committee, we have the responsibility of voting on resolutions. But that is really only a small part of what we do as a committee. And more important than that are the ideas and the questions and the discussion that we can all bring to the group. Okay, and I got a message from Commissioner Slotnick that he'd like to be on outreach as well. Thank you so much. Great. Is there anyone else who'd like to be on outreach committee? If not, I suggest we go to recruitment.
I would just say that in the background, that some people may not have seen the message that Christina sent before she had to leave the meeting, but she mentioned or indicated an interest in the outreach and the research subcommittees, and mentioned that either one would be a natural fit for her. I don't want to delegate one to her or speak for her, but I'm just relaying the message.
Sure. Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate that. Okay, then let's talk about recruitment committee. So again, this is following up on the work that we've done in the past to reach out and to recruit election workers and election judges. May also be helpful in securing or identifying potential polling places and election sites. There may be some other work as well that falls under that same umbrella, but this is about engaging with the broader community to support the work that the elections office does. Who would be interested in serving on that committee?
Denver, how do you delineate between the outreach and the other committee?
That's a great question. So
real close.
Yes, I think they are very similar. I think that I think that the distinction that I make is the outreach committee would be responsible for taking the information that we find, that we discover and talk about in committee, the good work that the elections office does, and make sure that we are connecting with other groups in the community and making sure that they know about that work. So reach out to neighborhood councils, community councils, city group, those kind of organizations that have ties within the larger community. This small subgroup of people would be primarily responsible for communicating and engaging with those other groups to make sure that they are aware of the good work that the elections department is doing and people's faith in the elections office. whereas recruitment is specifically focused on identifying people who want to be involved and want to be a part of the work that the elections department is doing. That's the distinction in my mind.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sounds like Shibu, you might have a question, or are you volunteering yourself for the recruitment committee?
Hi, Denver. Yes. I think I'm most interested in the research committee, but I just wanted to note there were two folks in the chat, Amber and Madison, who also indicated interest in the outreach committee. I just wanted to make sure you saw that.
Thank you very much. I was not watching the chats, but I appreciate you flagging that for us.
But yes, if I'm allowed to, I would love to serve on the research committee.
Okay, great, thank you.
And if one committee gets overstacked too heavily and nobody on the other, then I'm totally comfortable with doing recruitment instead of outreach, or both.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that flexibility. That's helpful. This is also not something that we have to lock down today. What I'd like to be able to do is simply to be able to identify those folks who are directly interested in some of these subcommittees. If I don't have any takers on the recruitment committee, we can follow up by email and kind of figure that out in the interim. Why don't we go to research? So I've got Christina and Shibu that have specifically volunteered for this subcommittee. Are there any other folks?
You know, if you're overstaffed on the outreach committee, I'd be happy to look at research as well. This is Todd, Denver.
Okay. Thank you, Todd.
Denver, one thing I'm wondering is outreach is really pretty broad, and it's kind of the base that we could build from on the other two committees. So I'm wondering if the EAC as a group should decide on some outreach projects and then assign them out to research or recruitment.
That's not a bad idea, and we can certainly do that. And some of these subcommittees may be more important to meet at certain times, as Bradley and I have talked about. As we move more into into municipal elections, for instance, next November, recruitment committee will become, of course, more active and more necessary. So if we don't have any takers that are really interested in doing recruitment, that's okay. We can move forward with the two that folks are interested in. So right now I've got, for outreach, I've got Todd, I have Josh, I have Christina, Amber, and Madison. And then on research, I have Christina, Shibu, and Todd so far.
This is Susan.
Interested. Oh, go ahead, Susan.
Oh, sorry. This is Susan. Were you going to put me on outreach?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Susan. Sorry, I missed you. And
this is
Travis.
I would be interested in the research one.
Research. Okay. All right. Thanks so much. Well, that gives us two subcommittees that have three to four people on them. That's a good place to start. We'll send out an email following this meeting so that those folks are on the same page, and we'll work with Bradley and the elections department to figure out how we can schedule a subcommittee for those people. Any other questions or comments before we move off of this?
This is Rebecca Dawson, and I'm also just an alternate, but I am willing to plug holes where needed on these subcommittees. So if you have one that needs another person, you can just plug me in there.
Rebecca, thank you so much. I appreciate your flexibility and volunteering. I am going to right now put you on the recruitment committee. And again, if there's other work that you would like to do, if you'd like to participate in some of those other committees, you certainly can. but it's helpful to find someone that can kind of head recruitment for us.
Alrighty.
Okay, the last thing that I just want to be able to reference today before we move on to comments from committee members is this areas of specialization. And I'm going to pull up the list that we had. I had sent out an email a couple weeks back with this list of areas of specialization. And again, the idea is that each committee member would identify one of these areas and then be able to work with Bradley and other elections department officials to be able to better understand that specific area. I'm going to go over these as a list. And then I think what makes sense is to go around to each committee member and ask where they would like to plug in. So first we have resolutions and calling for elections. Second, we have polling places. Third, we have election judge training. Fourth, we have voter registration. Fifth, we have voting equipment. Sixth, we have ballot processing. Seventh, we have recount and post-election audit. Eighth, we have canvass. Ninth, we have ADA and accessibility. And finally, 10th, we have parking and voter overflow. These are the top 10 kind of areas of specialization where Bradley suggested we identify one person who can really kind of take ownership of that issue. So I'm going to start back at the top. And I think what I'll do is just call on each committee member and you tell me where you would like to plug in. And I think I'd like to start with Travis.
I don't remember what all 10 of them were, but number 9 for sure.
Okay. Travis, would you like me to go over that list again, or
just quickly run down it again?
Sure. So we got resolutions and calling for elections, polling places, election judge training, voter registration, voting equipment, ballot processing, recount and post-election audit, canvass, ADA and accessibility, and parking and voter flow.
So this is just any of those that we have interest in?
Mm-hmm. We're asking folks to identify at least one of these areas that they can specialize in. So I've got you down for ADA and accessibility. Are there other areas?
Are you able to share that on your screen?
I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm working on a separate separate computer. But what I can do is send out an email following this meeting with that spreadsheet, and then folks can plug themselves in.
I think that would be helpful because even after twice, I don't remember what the first few were, but I have interest in many of those areas.
Okay, that's fine. I think that makes sense. While we are here and talking, is there anyone who is interested in plugging into one of those other areas?
This is Susan. I'd be interested in ballot processing and the voter flow and parking.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
This is Madison. I would be interested in voter registration and or canvassing, especially voter registration.
Okay, thank you, Madison. I appreciate that. And the canvas that we're talking about is the final certification of the the election results. That's the kind of canvas that we're talking about here, just to be clear.
And I'll stick to voter registration.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Madison.
Hey, Denver, this is Josh. I could work on the overflow and parking.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. I've got you down.
This is Kathy Nygaard.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I would pick training or registration or wherever.
Okay. Training and registration. Thank you, Kathy.
Denver, this is Todd. I think what I sent you in the email was voter ballot equipment and the audit.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Appreciate that.
You bet.
This is Shibu. I think my top interest for specialization would be polling places, and then followed by voting equipment.
All right. Thank you, Shibu. Okay, I'm going to start calling on some folks that haven't identified anything yet. Dr. Barsky, are you still with us?
I think she had to jump for a meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Amber Schaefer, are you still with us?
Yes, I will do election judge training and voter registration.
Election judge training and voter registration. Fantastic. Thank you, Amber. Okay. Mike Hopkins, are you still with us?
I am, Denver. I've been staying out of the conversation a little bit simply because up here at the legislature, obviously my time's going to be limited. So fine with whatever things the committee wants to focus on. And I would ask Rebecca Dawson as our alternate what she might be interested in instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. Rebecca, is there an area that you're interested in?
Can you read me the first two again on the list?
Oh, I'd be happy to. So resolutions and calling for elections is the first one. The second was polling places. The third was election judge training.
Any one of those three would be fine with me.
Okay, great. I think for right now, I'm going to plug you into resolutions and calling for elections since we didn't have anyone there.
Perfect.
And then finally, the only area that we don't have identified and covered right now is the canvas. Is there anyone on here? And Pam Walzer, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I will gladly fill in any of those. I feel really confident in election judge training and voter registration, but wherever I'm needed, I'm very interested in all of it.
Excellent. Pam, for right now, I'm going to suggest that we assign you to the final canvas. But again, what I will do is I will send out an email to our committee members with the spreadsheet. If there's another area that you're more interested in, or if you've changed your mind and you don't want to pursue the thing that you're currently assigned to, just let us know. We want folks to be able to pick areas that they're going to be really interested in and able to dive into. Susan, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was going to say the canvas kind of flows from the ballot processing, so I would be glad to do both.
Thank you. And Commissioner Slotnick, I think I saw your hand, and then we'll go to Shibu.
Oh, I'm good.
All right, thank you. Shibu?
Did I already share my specialization, or was my hand up? Sorry.
Your hand is still up, yes.
Oops, I'll try to undo that.
That is okay. So folks, this works out really well. I'm going to plug myself in here as well, but we've got all our 10 areas covered, and I really appreciate people stepping up and identify what they want to be able to explore. So that covers old business, unless there are any other questions or comments.
I would just say, as someone who's done all of those things on that list, great experience for all of you guys. I'm really looking forward to having you here, helping with some of those areas and teaching you everything we know.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nathan. Wonderful. Well, Susan, do you have another question or comment?
Yeah, Nathan's last comment is a perfect segue for an idea or a something that I thought might be useful for all of us. Every time I've gone in and worked as an election aide, I've learned more about the process of how those ballots move through the elections office. And every time it's just amazing, the checks and balances. And I was wondering if maybe on those who could, on the February 23rd election day for the Sealy and DeSmet, if we could have the EAC members come in and shadow through a ballot through the entire process.
That's not a bad idea. I don't see why not.
Susan, thank you for the recommendation. I think that's a great idea. It sounds like both Nathan and I are making a note that we'll follow up on that. Okay, any other questions or comments before we move off of this agenda item? Very good. Well, again, thank you everyone for stepping up and being part of this team. So the last thing we have, so we don't have any new business. Just as a quick reminder, if you have thoughts, ideas about things that the county elections department can do differently or improve, if you have a proposal for a resolution, you're always welcome to bring those things. There is a formal process for doing so. If you need help crafting a resolution, both myself and Travis and a number of other folks have a lot of experience doing that, and we'd be more than happy to help. So anyone is welcome to bring a resolution, but that's where in our agenda, that's where we would take that up. Seeing that we don't have anything, we'll just move on to comments from committee members. And why don't we start with Travis?
Sorry, what am I saying?
I'm just asking if you have any final comments as a committee member. That's where we're at.
On here, thank you.
Okay. Are there any comments from committee members that you'd like to include at this point?
Yeah, I can make a comment, Denver. This is Todd. I'm looking forward to working this year with a little more of a framework and a little more of a focus on some specific goals. I think that will make the committee more useful.
Hey there.
And
thanks
to,
a lot.
the election office. So I think that's a good idea.
Thank you, Todd. All right, any other comments from committee members? If not, let me just say it's been an absolute honor to serve with you all for the last 3 years. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, every single meeting. Really looking forward to hopefully continuing to be able to serve with you if I'm reappointed. I want to be able to acknowledge that these are weird and challenging times for all of us, and I'm sure that you all were just as shocked and horrified by events last week. I think what it leaves the impression on me is that the work of committees like ours are that much more important, to be able to show that people from different ideological perspectives, different backgrounds can come together, work together, and set aside some of our partisan feelings and work towards something greater. That's not to say that we don't have that people shouldn't have passionate ideas and feelings when it comes to elections, but we can engage in that conversation in a way that is respectful, and a way that respects the elections office and the county commission. And I think it is imperative that we all continue to treat each other with that level of respect. So thank you so much for all you do, and I'm looking forward to serving another term if I get that opportunity. All right, our next meeting is going to be in April. Nathan, do we have a specific date and time?
It's looking like April 13th at 3 p.m.
Okay. And assuming that will be through Microsoft Teams as well?
And that is correct.
All right, very good. Well, with that being said, we are at the end of our agenda today. I appreciate everyone's time and promptness. If there is a motion to adjourn, we'll take that up.
This is Susan, so moved.
Thank you, Susan. Is there a second?
I second it.
Second.
Todd.
Thank you, Todd. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say no. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Be safe, and we will talk to you soon. And keep an eye on your email because I will send that out momentarily.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.